Everybody, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super stoked to have an old time. Well, he's not old timey, but he's my old conference pal, Brian Clegg. He's the senior lender solutions manager with BlackBook. Brian, welcome to the podcast today.
It's great to be here, Joel. Thanks for inviting me. Very cool.
Great to see you. You look like you've been maybe not no worse for the wear with COVID. He's one of the folks you might bump into in the gymnasium when you're at your conference. Have you been staying healthy?
I'm trying to. I was talking to a customer when this thing first came out, with the lockdowns, and he had a funny thing. He said, "Yeah, we're either going to come out of this thing two ways, either a drunk or a hunk." So I don't know. I try to, exercise when I can, keeps you sane and feeling good. So
yeah. And are you based in Atlanta?
Yeah. I'm reporting live from the suburbs in my guest bedroom. But yeah, we're based in Metro Atlanta, just outside the perimeter, in the city of Lawrenceville is where our home office is at. And so, nice. And tomorrow would be the first day I go back into the office in 15 or 16 months. So I'm kind of stoked to see people.
That's awesome. Yeah. I bet you're curious about what your commute's going to look like.
It should be close to the same, 20 minutes, shouldn't be too bad. What's weird is you got to sign up and do a health screening before you go in and reserve your desk and stuff. So there's a little bit of red tape in there, but it's all good though.
That's good. Yeah. Nortridge opened. We reopened our offices last month, and I go up on Mondays. I was just up there yesterday, and yeah, it's really nice to be able to get together in a conference room. I mean, the Zoom calls are fine, right? We found our way through that, but when you have a multi-party conversation, everybody wants to talk at once, and it doesn't work with the telephony sometimes. So I think it makes a half an hour meeting go more like an hour sometimes.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go and meet with some customers down in Florida back in June, and man, it was great. It was just wonderful just to get back into it, kind of knock the rust off. I went from, being in the guest bedroom to all of a sudden standing in front of about 200 people, and it was, it definitely knocked the rust off.
Yeah. There was a conference in Florida. I think it was AFSA Independence. And it was very clear that I had to knock the rust off as well. Yeah. Get my game back on. But hey, you know what? I mean, what we want to talk about today, since you're with BlackBook, and obviously, Brian, you've been with them for some time. People know who you are. We just started with a basic question, like where are we now and how did we get here in terms of vehicle values? And maybe for folks, I doubt folks don't know, but when you're valuing a vehicle, you can look at certain levels, like NADA wholesale clean trade was what I used when I was lending for vehicle valuations on the purchase side. But then BlackBook was pervasive on the disposal side. But people use BlackBook on the front end as well. But can you just maybe, before we get into it, tell us a little bit about BlackBook and what all, maybe the full expanse of the offering?
Yeah. So, it's funny. A lot of people envision BlackBook as like some little small book that a dealer keeps in their pocket. And we've actually did a lot of new hiring, and some of the guys that came on board have just blown their mind at what all we do. In the lender side, of course, you look at a car value when you make a loan advance decision, and traditionally you may not look at it again unless the deal goes bad or if it's in deep collections. But since I've been at BlackBook, it's morphed into much more. We have lenders that take our data, pre-application, and they build different models and scorecards and look at which vehicles drop like rocks and which ones hold their value. And of course, if they hold their value better than others, they may have a higher advance piece. Then, of course, they look at the BlackBook at origination to make sure they're within where they need to be. But then post-funding, we've got a lot of customers that will value that portfolio every month, every quarter, then use that data to understand risk exposure, loss forecasting, and even take that data to their collections team and use it to understand which vehicles and which customers have the highest loss severity
Yeah.
potential. And then, so there's just a lot of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
we do custom vehicle reports for many captive finance companies and OEMs. You know, if they come out with a brand new vehicle, they want to see what our perspective is on what we expect the values to be. Just wild stuff. I mean, we've done custom indexes where you have like a black book index, but then we may create a, you know, ABC bank index just based on their portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot out there outside of just looking at what a car's worth. We've kind of we've beefed up the VIN coding, and that's helping a lot of lenders catch, you know, power booking before it occurs, which is a huge problem. And then about 3 years ago, we started with the history adjustments, where we partnered with Experian's Auto Check. So Black Book has kind of made a paradigm shift to where we're doing a VIN specific value. You know, it's not just a 3-year-old Camry. It's Brian Clegg's 3-year-old Camry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's, you know, had 2 wrecks, and I'm the 3rd owner. So that's kind of where we've gone, and the industry's been really open to it. You know, it was a little tough when you step out and do something new for the first time.
Yeah.
But it's been really great what all we're doing. The same thing with the residual values. We're those forecasted values. We're making those VIN specific as well, which is kind of a game changer for leasing companies. So they're getting a forecast on that VIN specific value versus just a generic forecast. So that's kind of new.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why I'm so excited to have you on, because I swim mostly with non-prime, and that's putting it lightly. More often than not, I'm deep subprime. And forecasting the future values of these vehicles, things like that. A lot of lenders know that at that level of credit, once you get sub 550, 500, you know, it's almost like the weight of the deal is more heavily on the collateral than it is on the borrower, because there's perhaps not as many good things to say about the expectation for the borrower. So there's nothing you can really do in that scenario to enhance that. On the collateral side, if you have the ability to encourage a collateral swap to substantially change what the forecasted loss rate of that deal is, I think about, you know, the quality of the vehicle, right? So I would rather have everybody driving Toyotas and Hondas, right? And that's just my preference versus, you know, a lot of the highline vehicles that are very costly to repair. And then you get going talking about, you know, how are we going to plug that risk, right? So I see a lot of that in deep subprime, and yeah, you and I've talked about that quite a bit, Brian, haven't we?
Yeah. No, you know, if you're a super prime bank, they may not care as much about the collateral as, say, you know, a subprime or deep subprime, but once you're in that credit spectrum, it's important. I mean, and it's important to get it right up front, and it's important to kind of see a loss coming ahead of time.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the value that we bring in. But as far as the market goes, yeah, you know, it was crazy. You know, I reached out to different customers and talked to even people that's been in the industry since before I was born almost. And no one's ever seen anything like this. We had at one point 22 weeks of increases, which is basically a long time of vehicle values going up. Now, recently we've seen it kind of settle some. But, you know, kind of how we got there or why this has occurred, you know, people talk about a perfect storm and those type of things.
Yeah.
It does go down to supply and demand. But when we think about supply, you know, there's not a used car factory. You know, there's not a factory that churns out used cars. Used cars come from different avenues or different sources. You know, one source is going to be trade-ins. You know, whenever somebody goes and buys a new car, they got to trade one in. So that's one big source. And then, of course, we got the issue with the chip shortage. So you're not getting those trade-ins. Another source are going to be those rental cars that when they defleet, and those will be those near new 2 and 3 year old vehicles that a lot of people love to finance. And then what happened last summer was they were heavy defleeting last summer. They were getting rid of them. Unlike normally when they defleet, they go buy new ones. Well, they didn't re-up and get more.
Is that word refleet?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a word or not. I know what defleet is.
Defleet is a deplete. They
right.
depleted their opportunity. Yeah, I remember when I was down at that conference in Florida, there was some folks I was speaking to that were traveling. Right, they came down to Florida and said, "Well, I'll bring down my spouse and we'll spend a couple of days. Maybe go down the Keys or something." They couldn't get rental cars. They couldn't.
Yeah, well, I was down there too. It was my room was more. I mean, the rental car was more expensive than my room. But so that's one piece. Then you got another piece is lease returns. Okay.
Yeah.
So lease returns are nothing but a calculated trade-in. It's just a trade-in is going to come back in say 30, 36 months. Well, we had approximately 2020 about 700,000 less leases than what we typically would see. So what that means is there's going to be 700,000 less lease returns coming back, in 2 or 3 years. So we understand that, and we know that that's going to help keep the wholesale prices strong going through 2023.
Brian, have you seen anything specific to a strategy, maybe broadly kind of done or captive by captive relative to how they're encouraging or supporting the whole lease return type thing? Obviously, during the pandemic, it was widely publicized that they were giving customers some leniency. Hey, I know your vehicle is due back off lease. We're just gonna roll with it, right? But then things changed. Had you tracked that story? And I'd love to hear more about that.
Some of it is if you're in a really, really great position, if you are in a lease, your buyout that you had in your contract is really a great deal because the values are so good. So you got some consumers are opting to buy out the lease in, and many times what they can do is buy it out and resell it.
Yeah.
And so that's a good position for them to be in right now. Then of course you've got dealers need inventory, so they're sourcing them almost any way they can find them. Mm-hmm. And if it's, hey, could you return this lease in, giving them offers and incentives to return it back in so they can resell it. I think a lot of lease customers are pleasantly surprised about the situation that they're finding themselves in right now. It's all in their favor. But you take, no rental returns. You take lease returns are low. Okay, new car sales are down because there's not hardly any new car sales.
The whole chip thing and the petroleum shortage. Yeah.
And then you also have another source of used cars, which are going to be your repos. Okay. That's another source of used cars. And then a lot of these repos didn't occur. A lot of people, well, there's two things. They had the stimulus, so they're able to pay their bills, which is a good thing for lenders.
Yeah.
And then you also had different laws in different states where people were holding off on doing the repos. And then, of course, you take that fiscal stimulus. People got money, and that's where you get that demand from. And, it feels like it's kind of leveled out. Quoting another customer, he said it best to me. He was like, a tree can only grow so tall, and I think the customers are now educated well enough. They understand that the prices are crazy high. And a lot of them are kind of just holding off a little bit. And so we feel like it's peaked, and we don't expect it just to crash down. We expect a soft landing to occur. It's just nuts. I mean, if you bought a 2017 model in January of 2020, it appreciated by 22%. So it's just a crazy market out there. We expect the rest of 2021 to be just like what we're seeing now.
You think it'll still be appreciative?
We think it's just going to stay steady.
Okay.
We don't see any big depreciation or large swings. Last year we had negative 2% depreciation on 2 to 6 year old vehicles. So that's a big deal. And the reason being is if you go back in time and look back almost as far as you want, average depreciation for a 2 to 6 year old is about 13.5% per year.
Yeah.
So 2% is just insane.
But you said -2, right?
-2%. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually, it's appreciating.
Compare that to 2019, it was 16.8%. So, we're expecting it to be pretty much no depreciation this year. Fuel prices are going up, but it could create some pressure if the trend continues. But we don't see that being a big deal going forward either. We think the inventory is going to stay low for the foreseeable future. You got retail and fleet sales down, and that used return volume will be limited for a few years to come. Because those rental car companies still don't have cars.
Well, and plus, like I think about my vehicle. I don't put a lot of mileage on my vehicle, but last year it was even worse because I wasn't commuting anymore, and obviously, I'm in San Diego, and Nortridge's offices are up in Lake Forest. That's about an hour and a half drive. Now I'm doing it, but I remember whenever I talk to my insurance company, they're like, how many miles do you drive in a year? I'm like, I drive about like 3,000 to 5,000, and they always double take. They're like, come on, you're just trying to get the rate low. And no, this is really what I drive. Like, I'll send you odometer pics. Like it's legit. Mm-hmm. So I think during the pandemic, that probably had some kind of effect. So what I'm wondering now in that respect is, now that we're going back to work, now that the eviction moratorium is lifting, right? The repossession moratorium should move in some relation, right? At least temporarily, with the legislators and the regulators. Trying to wonder, like, what is the dynamic of the demand versus the supply? Like, are we going to see even more demand now, or is it that the demand is going to remain pretty steady? I have to guess, like, if I were going to guess, that I have to guess that demand will kick up with people going back to work and getting off the government programs, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the case to where, the price has kind of hit its point, regardless of demand, with supply being low. We just don't expect it to go any higher than what it's been. And we're starting to see wholesale and retail prices starting to decrease some. Now, not just to more level out, but that 22 weeks of highs is kind of, that tree grew as tall as it's going to.
I like that.
It can't get any taller. It's starting to shed a few leaves, I guess.
Yeah. No, and I liked how you used the perfect storm analogy. I don't know if you know Paul Machine, but I had Paul, he's with Black Book as well. I had him on the pod, and we talked about the perfect machine and the K-shaped recovery. I mean, I look back and I think there was so much unknown, and then now we're here. And would you have predicted, Brian, hey, I'm going to put go back to 2020, early 2020. I say, Brian, here's the deal. I'm Nostradamus, right? I'm going to put a global pandemic on you. Okay. You're going to have to quarantine in place for a very long time. Mm. It's going to disrupt your brain, your mentality. It's going to disrupt so many things and all around us. People are going to go all ape wild, right? But as a result, we're going to get a bunch of people that are going to be totally fine in their houses, in their cars. We're not going to repo them. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. Delinquencies are going to actually be looking really good. And demand's going to, these cars are going to appreciate. If I told you all that, right, back in January of 2020, I mean, you would have gone back to, if you were at a conference, you would have walked over to Paul Machine. You would have said, I just talked to Joel, and I think we need to get his head examined, because he's on the sauce.
Yeah. I mean, and the hits kind of just kept coming. You had the ice storm in Texas, that disrupted.
Remember the Suez Canal? Yeah. That had an effect too.
I mean, the hits kind of just keep coming. We'll have to kind of see what happens with this new, I guess, Delta variant, and how that affects. Hopefully we're through this. But you may hit. I think there was a factory that builds the cushions that go into the seats.
Yeah.
And they to build a car, it's not just they just roll out. There's who knows hundreds of different suppliers that are involved.
Correct.
If you're just missing one piece, even now with the new cars, they're still churning some out, but what they're doing is they're taking out some of the features that typically come standard, and dropping the value some. It's not going to come with, adaptive whatever, but that needs a chip. They're just going to take some of that off the new car price, and you're just going to have to, if you want that new car, you're just not going to get all the normal features that you would normally get. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see, but people are still buying them up. I mean, I'm looking at a graph in front of me now. May of 2020, new car sales was around 3.4 million. And as of this week, it is about 1.7.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's going down.
Summertime is usually a bigger time for sales, right? You would expect to see it much greater. Once you come into tax season, it starts coming up, and then it goes up through summer, and then it kind of jumps back down, at least in terms of originations. I don't know if it's the same with.
Yeah. And then, all the different lenders that I talk to, if I had to put a number, usually it's year over year is 30% higher. Okay. In originations, vehicle values are holding well. So the folks in remarketing are looking like heroes. Okay. Rates are still low. So, you can still get some decent margins there. And then people are paying their bills. So you're kind of, it's probably a really, really good time to be in the finance business. Everything's kind of working out to their favor, Yeah.
I mean, look, God bless somebody who came into collections during the pandemic, and it's just smooth sailing. And, and they're looking at the old hand over there, all nervous about what's going to happen, next quarter, saying, dude, just relax. It's going to be fine. And they're saying, no, man, you haven't seen it when it's bad in collections. Like, we're just getting hammered, and there's no love. It could get scary.
But, we do think that they're gradually going to decline. Okay. But they're coming off such a high. Okay. Even if it's 10%, that's still ridiculously high. And, you're looking at, who knows, probably three plus years before we get back to those values being more normal. It's just really, a lot of it's dependent on that chip shortage, And
you and I were talking a little bit about some of those trends and looking out. I like that 3-year kind of look, because there's obviously, with the Delta variant, there's obviously still some runway here with the pandemic. And I just spoke to somebody today who has a 12-year-old child who they said they are vaccinated. And I was like, I was unaware that you could even vaccinate down to that age. I thought it was just down to 15, 16. So we're making progress there. But some of these trends, I'm interested to hear what you think about, kind of where we're going to go from here, and when those trends are going to kind of hit, because I think a lot of folks listening are operators, and they're looking to try to do the right moves now to be proactive. I think a lot of us as operators are sitting there saying, well, I dodged a bullet there because things are looking really good on the portfolio side. The origination side may be a little bit muted, but I'd rather take better performance on the portfolio and sacrifice on originations. I think most people would choose to do that because the alternative is kind of a ticking time bomb. But what are some of the key trends that you're seeing that you think are really relevant to some of the operators?
I think one trend is the remarketing channels. Auctions, the physical auctions, they're no longer the main source for dealers to acquire inventory. Direct to dealer, private party sourcing, dealer to dealer platforms, they've grown in popularity. You have some of those guys that would typically always go to a physical auction. Pre-pandemic, they weren't comfortable buying a car, sitting on the beach on their laptop. Those guys have gotten comfortable with it and they like it. So the auctions aren't going away, but these upstream channels, private seller acquisition platforms, dealer to dealer platforms, those are getting much more traction, becoming much more popular. The remarketers do miss that dialogue and relationship in the lanes with the dealers and deals and the things that are made after the sale. So the physical auctions aren't going anywhere anytime soon, but these dealer to dealer platforms and upstream channels are just going to, and private seller acquisitions are going to increase to help find, they're just getting super creative, trying to find ways to get more inventory. Another big topic is, EVs. Every time you turn on TV, just about, there's a commercial for EV. It's just, if you didn't know any better, if you were just the normal kind of consumer, you would think, 2 years from now, everybody in the U.S. is going to be driving an electric vehicle, But I think what you got to be aware of is EVs are really a tiny, tiny portion of sales. Okay. When you look at 2020, okay, out of all sales, okay, new car sales, it was only like 1.7%. So it was a tiny fraction. Okay. We're expecting that to increase maybe up to 2% this year. So that means only 2 out of 10 consumers are going to buy, an EV. We expect it to continue, but even in say 2025, it's still not going to be at 10%. We're not even expecting it to be 10% of market until 2027. So I think that's something to be mindful of. They are cool cars and they're great, but infrastructure is not there.
Yeah.
Range anxiety and all those different things.
Yeah.
So, looking at say 2030, maybe 16% of the market share. So they're coming along, but
doesn't a lot of that have to do, Brian, with the supply side as well? So I'm seeing more electronic vehicle offerings out on the road, right? I saw a Volkswagen the other day that looked like it was a straight electric. Obviously Tesla, like my guess is that the captives or these, or the OEMs, I guess the vehicle producers, the majors they already have these things in flight, right? Pretty much every major is going to have some kind of electric vehicle offering. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, they're coming out with a lot of new ones. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be a lot more selection outside of just Tesla, and they're all kind of chasing them for the most part.
Yeah.
But it's just not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a while, even 10 years from now. Still, the majority of cars were expected to still be, gas powered, diesel.
Yeah.
It's just going to, the infrastructure is not there. It was one guy I was talking to. He made it pretty clear. He's like, "What do you do if you live in the city? You don't have a garage. Are you going to get an extension cord and throw it outside of your apartment down to the street?" There's just a lot of infrastructure needed to get there.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of important just to understand. Last year, 1.7%. Less than 2%, maybe 2% this year of new car sales, and that's if we get the supply where we need it to be. So that's kind of just some trends out there that we're seeing just with the EVs, and then of course the remarketing channels outside of your traditional auction picking up in popularity. But and I don't know if you get this, Joel, but you may sign up for it. It's totally free for you don't even have to be a Black Book customer. But if you go to blackbook.com and there's market insights every week. So we just came out with it Tuesday. It used to be, I don't know if you remember Ricky Beggs. It used to be he would do a video and it was on YouTube, and he would do a video giving a market recap. Now it's an email, and we just summarize all this information every week. So if you're listening, and just go to blackbook.com insights and sign up for the market updates. We're not taking your information and sharing with anybody. We're just going to send you straight from Black Book exactly what we're seeing and what we're expecting and what's going on. And so really good free resource for any of the listeners out there.
That's great. And there's quite a lot more, Brian, with at Black Book as well. And we were talking, some of the things that I've done in the past is try to at least on the front end to eliminate some of the power booking. Is you try to get as much detail of what exactly is that car composed of, what are the ads, all that, by breaking down that VIN. And you were telling me about some of the kind of enhancements that you guys have been making relative to that as well. But like, what are some of the tell me some of the new cool things that are on tap for Black Book, because I think people are kind of hungry to know what's out there, and obviously folks like yourself are so attuned to the market that I know that informs a product build. So I'm really excited to hear maybe some of the new cool things you have, and maybe you can share.
Well, just talk about VIN decoding, and then also the lender. Okay. The lender is, of course, financing the deal. Okay. But does the lender ever really touch the car? Do they ever really get to see it outside of if the deal goes bad? And the answer is no. The finance company, the bank, they're putting money out there. And historically, there have been issues with the flawed system of VIN code. And about 30% of all VIN numbers, they don't decode down to trim level. You talk about the Ford F-150s, the Nissans, and so forth. And so it was a problem. And so we, years ago, we first went out to all the different OEs and was like, hey, we'd like to work with you, because not only would it help the finance company, it also helped the values, because if you've got a remarketer or someone buying a vehicle, if they decode the VIN and it doesn't give it all the options, it doesn't have the value. They're losing money because of the VIN decode. So we went out to everybody. What we wanted to do is get everybody to give us our build data to make sure we get the vehicle right. And we've had a handful take us up on it, and now we're receiving that, and it's in our VIN code. Then some of the ones that we haven't got there yet, we use some of our other resources. So Black Book gets about 90% plus of every single wholesale transaction that occurs. So that's pretty much all of Odessa, all of Manheim, about 120 independent in AAA auctions. Direct to dealer sales. If enterprise sells, X amount of cars to a dealer direct, we get that data. But where I'm going is we're receiving all those VIN numbers. And then outside of that, we get all the retail listings. So what that is if Jerry's Chevrolet puts a Malibu on sale today, we're going to get that listing whenever it gets online. So we're getting all the auctions, okay, and we're getting all the retail listings. So what we do is we archive and we get all those VIN numbers. I think we're up to almost 45 million VIN numbers, 17-digit VIN numbers. And we're able to, if we're not getting it from the OE, we're able to look and see, hey, was it listed as an XLT? Yes. Was it sold at auction as an XLT? Yes. And we look at that data. And once we're comfortable knowing that we're right, we're just basically getting that trim right. And if we have any options, we're verifying that. But then what we do is, if for some reason we can't, decode the VIN down to trim and we can't verify the options, we're providing customers access to a link that'll just take them to the car. So if you're a funder or underwriter, your final check, or if you're doing a customer interview, you can put eyes on the car. Whereas before, you just had to go with what was sent to you. And so it's just helping a lot of folks catch bad deals up front.
And that's a time save, because for some folks that have a more deep subprime, it definitely historically has benefited from a lot more touch, right? A lot more manual intervention. And your smarter underwriters or funders are going to do that. They're going to check out the vehicle and verify it on the dealership website. But if you can automate that, which is what you've done, and tie it in with the VIN, I mean, it's no underwriter can underwrite a VIN. You have to get the build data. You have to know in order to verify. Otherwise, you need to go and physically inspect that collateral.
And the same thing with those history adjustments I mentioned. I run a lot of different sample files. I'll do like a what if scenario. What if you would have had this data at origination? So I'll have somebody send me, hey, we funded, these 1,000 loans over the past 2 months. And I'll run kind of a what if. What would we have shown if you would have had our data?
Right.
And a lot of times we'll find things, especially if they're working with a lot of independents. You'll have a deal. They'll easily catch dealers that are buying frame damage units, and they're buying them for a discount, thousands of dollars less than the average wholesale, but they're not displaying it to the lender or to the consumer, and their margins are huge. Well, what this does too is it helps that finance company, find out who's doing that. Doesn't mean they can't do the deal. Just with these history adjustments that we do to the value, they're unbelievably precise. They're just going to advance the right amount. And part of why we built that too is, people pull a Carfax or auto check. And let's just say you and I are both underwriters, and we look at a Carfax or auto check and we see frame damage. Well, you may look at it and say, hey, I think we should take off $2,000. Then I look at it and say, I think we got to take off $1,500. And then somebody else looks at it, let's take off 3,000. So there's a lot of subjectivity out there. We put science behind it and take out all the subjectivity. So it's not like the traditional Black Book was not accurate. We just figured out a way to get just much more precise. And it's customers, have loved it. At first, they were a little bit, anytime something new, it takes a minute. We kind of stuck our neck out there. And going forward, that's kind of the Black Book value, is a VIN specific, history adjusted value. And it's going to do nothing but just improve more and more. But yeah, so it's been exciting. I mean, it's the capabilities that we have today compared to when I came to Black Book almost 10 years ago are just insane, in a good way. And even just the people that we bring. Do you know Renee Abdallah? He was at RVI for forever. Then he was at GM, and a lot of these conferences, you'll have these panels where you'll have some guy from Black Book, used to be Ricky Beggs, and then you'll have somebody from Kelly and somebody from JD Power, and they all get up and talk about the market. Well, Renee was with the RVI, and he was kind of that person, and he's been on both sides of the fence. He's been the one behind the scenes building the models, for residual values for OEs, and so to get him on our team, it's great. He gives us more insight and just the people that he knows, and I think I'm just glad to have him on board. So that's helped us do better things. Like even our retail listings data, I mentioned all the website. There were things that we didn't really think of to how to use that data. Mm-hmm. And things like remarketing optimization, understanding where there's demand for certain vehicles in certain parts of the country, understanding OE, understanding, hey, where are my cars going? Typically most OEs probably keep a car 3 years, and after that it's gone. But a lot of them would like to keep that life cycle, because that vehicle, that Toyota, is going to be on the road for 7 years, 8 years plus, to keep it the whole time. So that there's just a lot of new things coming out. Some of the best ideas just come from our customers. And so it's exciting for sure.
This is no different than any other conversation that I have with you, Brian. It's always enlightening. You're so well connected to the market. It's nice to pick your brain, and you're very casual in your delivery. So I don't feel like I'm getting just pummeled with getting told all the things that I've been doing wrong all this time. But for folks that want to learn more, or maybe see how this might, fit into their operations, Brian, what's a good way for them to get a hold of you or other folks,
Yeah, no, you guys can you can email me, or you can call me. We can, all kinds of ways. My email's B as in boy, Clegg, CLEGG @blackbook.com. Probably a lot of people listening. I'm on LinkedIn. You can send me a message. You can call me 706-570-9344. But I may not answer because I think it's a robocall trying to give me the so leave a message.
Bro, I'm with you. I put my phone number on my articles. I put it on my LinkedIn. If you want to get a hold of me, get a hold of me. But yeah, no, I actually, my cell phone, the primary 3 numbers are from Maryland. And so a lot of the robocalls, they'll mask themselves and they'll call in on that 240 or 410 area code. And I say, I don't know anybody back there anymore. I've been out in California for long enough that if I know you back there, you're already coded in my phone probably. So yeah.
Screen those guys.
All right. Sad. No robocalling of Brian Clegg allowed from now on. We're making that an edict. All right, pound the table. It's done.
There we go.
But Brian, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And definitely looking forward to getting back out there to the conferences and mixing it up with you more.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you in person, Joel. I'm likely headed to the Auto Finance Summit for sure in October. So I'm excited about that. But thank you again, Joel. It's just a great honor and pleasure to be on this call. And I hope it benefits some of the listeners.
It definitely will. And once again, this is Brian Clegg with Black Book. It's bclegg @blackbook.com on the email, and maybe one last time for the phone number for folks that want to learn more.
706-570-9344.
There you go. Brian, thanks again.